So I want to talk about energy, effort, and effortlessness, as well as change and the changelessness. So I want to start with change and changelessness, because I think it's very interesting in terms of, you can say, the process of self-knowledge, or even in the process of awakening. In that, every, you can say, spiritual teaching, or even overview or contextual way of looking at things, those are all given for the mind, the heart and mind, in order to understand. And there are numerous approaches, ways, and modes to go about it. The most important thing, I think, to become aware of, because I've had some interesting processes lately with people, the most important thing to become aware of in this is what you are doing at any given moment, mentally and emotionally. Yes, to understand the mind, which is a succession of states of consciousness that are characterized by will, thought, and feeling. In terms of this line of teaching or understanding, especially from the point of view of, well, these particular lineage gurus, is to start to understand. Maharaj says, in order to understand what you are, you must first understand what you are not. It is not necessarily that you are not something. The basis of that, there was a thing where a king had a dream. Maharaj speaks of this story. A king had a dream and told his guru, I dreamt. So this king had a dream. I had a dream that I was a beggar. So am I a king dreaming to be a beggar? Or am I a beggar dreaming that I'm a king? And Maharaj says, both and neither. The reason one must understand and start to tame the mind, to understand the dynamics of the mind, and this is through effort, is because the mind is consumed in seeking. The mind is efforting all of the time, efforting, and the mind is fueled to a certain degree. The moving mind of the changing person is moved and is the functioning and the expression of desire, aversion, all rooted in ignorance of the nature and of the reality and the truth of what one is in truth. So to say, to understand what you are not, it is not that there is not a relative arising of you as a, quote, even person or an identity. It's to understand that that is changing all of the time. So the identity of the personage of your identity, it's changing all the time. And we identify ourselves, well, Eugene calls the bundle, all of the thoughts, all of the ideas of what we are, identified by what we do. And we hang our happiness and modality of seeking in trying to make that a stable and unchanging situation, changing all the time, constantly. Everything is changing. Nothing is staying the same for more than a billionth of a second. So we are the human mind in the movement of seeking happiness in the impermanent and in the changing, is in the bondage of those afflicted modes of the mind. And the essential key in spiritual practice and spiritual understanding, there's a line in a prayer that says, grant your blessing that I free my mind stream, the innermost practice. Once this is seen and freed, and that is where then we have conscious observation. So the consciousness is the capacity to know. The cognizant presence of consciousness, this I amness, is the capacity of knowledge itself. Not knowledge in the sense of, oh, I know that that's a yellow flower over there, but the cognizant presence of knowledge. And since the ordinary or thinking mind or sense of self is constantly consumed with objects, and there you have what we call dualistic fixation. So even the desire of non-dual liberation, what first must be understood, is the dualistic fixation that is keeping you bound. And simultaneously, and or in times of practice, to inquire, to sit quietly, because in peace and in silence and in the understanding and the ceasing of the movements of mind, you then, and this when they say even internal, introspection, in between the moving thoughts and in between the fixation and the grasping, which is why or in terms of the pointing out instruction, even in the Tibetan tradition, is to recognize the presence that is there, right here, in the midst of the movement, fixation, change. There is something in each and every one of us that is unchanging, changelessness. And to begin to bring, to tame, so all of this is to understand and tame the dynamic energy of the object-oriented, consumed mind. The objects, your body, your relationships, ideas, so the dualistic mind is consumed with objects, 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 objects. And that is why even in meditation, there is the coming into, yes, a quiet, not focusing on object, not necessarily contracting inward, but taking the journey. So when they say inward, to the heart. And the greatest power, one of the greatest powers, is the power of observation, the power of the observing consciousness. And there is nothing outside of awareness, and there is nothing outside of consciousness, because this is one singular arising consciousness that is expressing diversity, not separateness, but diversity. So the more the sense of self as this separate, bound body, mind, I, fighting for its contracted existence of diluted impermanence, once that is seen and the dynamics of that are understood and known, now we're to energy. And by the way, there is effort in that. there is a needing of an effort to understand, an effort for the bringing the energetic attention into that capacity of observation. So there is an effort. There is, because the dynamic energy, the consciousness is the dynamic energy of awareness. This arising consciousness is the dynamic energy of awareness. And the ordinary mind gets consumed in the energy. Ooh, emotional energy, conceptualizing. And I'm not talking about even necessarily the vital energy in that. I'm talking about the energy in the movement and the energy in the movement of the mind. A little more of a subtle thing here. So you watch what it's up to. And then the other dynamic, which is one of the most beautiful potential gifts of spiritual practice, is when you cultivate the positive qualities or the positive attributes of your nature, and also of the expressive dynamic of your mind, of compassion, patience, tolerance, generosity. When the feeling nature, so because the mind will even move to, so you can even say emotion, you have a thought, there's emotion. But when you engage the feeling nature in the feeling nature of a very deep aspiration and desire for the liberation of suffering for yourself and all beings. When that feeling nature is engaged in that very attending and cultivating of that, moves the heart mind into its rightful place. Of the responsiveness of awareness, being, pure consciousness. All of the practice, mantra, silent meditation, is to refine to a certain degree the energetic dynamics of the mind. And yes, there is a disciplined attention and effort in that. because the mind is often consumed by efforting. But when there is the relaxation and dropping, I'm going to say dropping into the heart. The awareness is awakened in the heart. It was very interesting. Noor had the other day, it's talked about the seat of awareness. I remember you were asking about that, and had one thing arise with that, and that is that, of course, my response to that is that ultimately, no, awareness, the body is arising in awareness. Ultimately, the body is arising in awareness. But realization, the heart, that's the realization is seated in the heart. The self nature is completely and fully realized. And it is effortless reality. It is the changeless awareness that is the basis for the arising dynamic energy of consciousness itself. That is what is to be nurtured, recognized, in terms of liberating the mind of samsara, of its cyclic repetitiveness. And only you can do that. And one of Natone's teachings that I've shared many times and that I have written down and never forgot was that never give any object power over your consciousness. What I just spoke of is the application of doing just that. That is how you come to, I'm going to say, a true power. Because when you start to discover that the movements of mind, and most importantly, the afflictive emotions, when you start to realize that they are disempowering, then you're really onto it. And you start to understand, and you start to see the difference in your being, which is to each in one's own capacity. When you start to see and understand the difference, it's pure consciousness, this pure being. And then the dynamic energy of what I call white water. The emotions I call, I have a thing in my book about riding the waves of emotions. And I liken it to a surfer, basically. Before a surfer goes out in huge waves, they watch those waves. They watch how they break. They're like scientists. When they ride the wave, best place to be, right inside that tube, that clear space, right before it breaks. And sometimes you get pummeled in white water, submerged in the afflicted emotional dynamic. And however far and deeply one is submerged and suffering, one will then fight the way back or find the way back. But the center and the presence of awareness in that is the center. And that's the center of the wave. So never give any object power over your consciousness. Because then that puts primal awareness in the seat of power. And in the times, and then lastly, there's decision. There's decisiveness. And that is also a movement and a taming of the mind, a decisiveness. When you have understood, when you have seen, understood, and known the dynamics and patterns which can be enlivened and re-brought to life at any moment. That's the other thing. And that's the power of the mind. The mind is incredibly powerful. Whatever gets energized is what's alive. So in terms of the emotional dynamics or those kinds of things, if they are, you know, and you have understood, and you have cut your own fixation to a certain degree, then you have the willfulness of your own intention and of your own mind. Oh, I've seen this. I've understood this. I know this. I know where this is going. And that is then living your realization. That's then living your discernment. And that is where the spiritual practice becomes alive. And the hope or the intention of a spiritual teaching or any concepts that are given on that level, because the realization and the recognition of reality is not a concept. The ineffable self-nature is not a concept, but the ideas and the constructs are given of a larger context in which to view things. And that is the beauty of the Dharma. The beauty of the Dharma is that the teachings are given for a view,